Hello and welcome to Sport for Business. We are joined this morning by Conor Smyth. Conor is the founder and CEO of Triton Lake, a boutique financial investment firm which is based in New York but traveling all around the world. Well, maybe less so over the last couple of years. For the purposes of our chat today, though, they are also the main primary commercial partner of the Irish Rugby Sevens programme. You're very welcome to Sport for Business, Conor.
Thank you, Rob, and nice to meet you.
Tell me, what is it that makes sport attractive to a self-described ultra high net worth investment company? And tell us a little bit about the background to establishing Triton Lake.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think maybe to touch on the background first to set the scene, what really stood out for me was the similarity in the journeys that the Ireland Sevens program has been on and the journey that Triton Lake has been on. And, you know, I set up Triton Lake in 2015 off the back of a 20 odd year career in a software business here in Dublin, MoneyMate, which was providing technology and managed services to a global client base of asset management firms and wealth managers. So that's where I guess I got my first-hand experience in the investment world. But also got a very clear view on the wealth management side of it, and specifically the numbers that were at play, right? And as we sold the MoneyMate business to a private equity firm in New York, and as I was trying to look at what I was going to do next beyond that sale, one of the things I had seen was a trend in terms of the wealth management teams that would be looking after the portfolios for ultra high net worth individuals and families, leaving the big banks, so the UBSs and the Merrill Lynches in the US, and going out on their own independently because they felt restricted in terms of the types of investment opportunities they could bring to those clients. And, you know, what really struck me about it was not just the fact that they were doing it in the first place and getting in control of their own economic destiny, but it was the numbers that were at play. So they were leaving, you know, 2 or 3 people on a team were leaving with $4 billion of assets under management for a couple of families in Florida or whatever else. And it struck me that if I could build a shop window of like-minded entities that, you know, had significant capital at play, had an appetite for alternative investment opportunities, and most importantly, I guess, wanted to source and do the diligence on those investment opportunities themselves, that would be something that would then be a compelling value proposition to put in front of managers that were looking to raise capital. And it, you know, I viewed it as a growing segment of the market that but probably a lot of these bigger shops hadn't tapped into yet, because they would have focused a lot of their time from a private market perspective on the large state plans, endowments, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and so on. And that played out to be true. So as I built the network of investors in the US, and I started in the US by design because of the numbers that are at play there, but also because they all speak the same language, or so, you know, to a large extent they do at least. And it's one regulatory regime, almost most importantly, right? So it was easy to build out. Easy is a bit of an overstatement. It made sense to start there and, you know, spend a number of years building that network and starting to bring them alternative investment fund ideas. So that was
we're all about collaboration as well, and the importance of that. This is, despite the big numbers and the big deals which might be at play, my sense is that it's still very much a person-to-person business.
It's a person-to-person business. Now, I would say, Rob, that we have invested significantly on the technology side of what we do, but it's as an enabler. So I would say we're technology led, with then the relationship and service aspect around it, right? Because these folks, they're writing significant checks into the funds, and it's not something they're going to do by clicking buttons on a website and entering their credit card details, right? So they clearly need to be able to leverage technology to streamline that process as much as possible. And, you know, oftentimes they're being inundated with people pitching them investment ideas left, right, and center every minute of the day. So being able to get to the ideas that should be of potential interest to them in as efficient mean as possible is something that's, you know, highly valuable. And we view it that we only get slivers of their attention. And the more we can maximize the value of those slivers of attention by being as relevant to them and adding as much value as possible, the more that they will value the experience they have from Triton Lake, and the more they'll transact as a result of that. If that
and
makes sense.
Is that where sport comes in? Is sport the sliver that is grabbing their attention?
Well, sport comes into it a little bit like that, and especially sevens. There's a lot of correlation as well in the difference of the sevens game versus the longer games without as many breaks, because sevens is clearly 14 minutes of high intensity sport with high skill levels and no room for error. As one of the group said to me recently, there's nowhere to hide on a sevens pitch. You've got 14 minutes and you're there, you're on display, right? You make a mistake, everyone knows about it. Whereas with a longer game with less interruptions or with more, you don't have that luxury. And I think, particularly in a world where people are spending a lot of their time looking at devices, even while they're observing these things, the nature of sevens is that it grabs their attention more, because they don't have to be distracted from whatever else is competing for that attention as much, right? Because it's not for as long a time. But really, if I followed through on where the connectivity into the sevens came, that once we had proven that the model was one that made sense and added value to that ultra high net worth wealth management community in the US. Clearly, the next thing we wanted to do was start building out a more global investor coverage. And, we had done that on an ad hoc basis with adding a number of names in Europe and the UK and Canada. But to do it effectively was going to be difficult, because it was one thing being on the ground in the US and being able to go out and meet folks and build relationships. And, that would have been much more difficult, over the last couple of years. So from a timing perspective, that wasn't bad for us when COVID happened, because we had built a lot of that network already, and we built a lot of brand awareness and so on. But doing it internationally is a different story, right? So I was looking for an opportunity that would play into that plan to build a more global awareness around it. And, Sevens provided a perfect opportunity. And I've been keeping an eye on it for a number of years. I had witnessed the team unsuccessfully qualify to be one of the core teams in 2018 in Hong Kong. But it struck me then really that the audience that was there was all of the investment bankers, the private banks, all of that community from the Hong Kong area was there. And I thought to myself, if they did qualify to be one of the core teams, this is something that we need to seriously consider, because much more so than the 15 teams or anything else, you're looking at a team that goes and plays in 10 venues every year, in normal years, including Australia and New Zealand. But if we look at next year, they're going to be playing in Dubai, Singapore, London, in France, in Toulouse, in the US, in LA, in Canada, in Vancouver. And all of those markets are very relevant for us, right? So it enables us to achieve quite a broad reach geographically. But most importantly, the target market and a lot of the folks that are going and interested in those events are very relevant to us in terms of people that we want to see the brand. So it's been really good from the perspective of fit. As we mentioned earlier on, the timing is very similar, right? So the reboot of the Sevens program was 5 or 6 years ago as well. When we started, we both started out, doing the hard work ourselves. In my case, it was me going around with the notepad, having as many conversations as I could. In the Sevens team, they had to play in all sorts of places dotted around Europe, right, as Billy alluded to in the podcast. But then there was the key moment of qualification for the Olympics, which happened earlier this year. For us, I think our milestone along the way was building out the team to where we have it today, and having the technology in a place where we can truly now scale it to be a global business. And I think once you get to a stage where you have a structure around the resource and a design around a go-to-market and scaling and the technology side of it to support that, that's when you can truly take advantage of, key partnerships like this and leverage them to accelerate that plan that you have then to build out a more global awareness.
You can generally judge a company by the company it keeps, and clearly Sevens is very geared towards that financial sector. The fact that HSBC is the global sponsor on it tells you something, in the same way that Guinness, for example, would be sponsored for the Six Nations as well. Yeah. So that is clearly something which is going to be relevant to you as a business. In terms of Ireland, though, was it always going to be the Irish program that you targeted and identified? Because obviously you're an international business, but where was your own personal growth for rugby in Ireland come from?
Yeah, well, I played rugby here when I was growing up, not in school, but after school I played in Greystones, and I played in Old Belvedere, and I would have played in sevens, a couple of sevens tournaments, played tag rugby for many years once I was too old to be actually playing proper rugby anymore. And, I always liked that. I was a back, so I always liked the sevens, or the tag aspect of it, where it was really much more around creating opportunities and trying to score tries, right? So I always liked the fast-paced side of it. But I think it would have been a big ask for me to get my head to a place where I was sponsoring a team other than Ireland on the circuit. I think as well, and I don't mean to sound Irish per se, but there certainly is a benefit to having the Irish angle as you do business internationally. And it's one I've noticed over the 20 plus years I've been doing business in the US. And, once you get past some of the misaligned stereotypes that they have, there's a lot of respect there, and they do want to, there's folks that relate to it that will go out of their way then to help you on your journey as well. So I think it all fits into that story.
Where does the name Triton Lake come from?
Triton Lake, actually, believe it or not, is the lake that is at the back of Paris Court House. So if you go out to the gardens in Paris Court, behind the house, there's a lake at the back there that has a statue of Triton in the middle of it, and that's called Triton Lake. And it was a stroll out there one day while I was trying to come to some idea of what I might call my next business, and this is before I knew what Triton Lake would be even, right? But it struck a chord then, and I think it's worked well. I think it's effective because most people, when they hear it, immediately know how to spell it, right? Which is you don't get that with some business names today. So that's if someone hears it and they can then go and look it up, that's a good start. And obviously the URL and everything is very easy to access from that perspective, but that's where it is. So I grew up in Greystones in County Wicklow, not far from there. So there is a tie back to that side of my childhood as well.
I've probably walked around it 100 times, and I never would have tagged that as being. I had an image of somewhere off the Great Lakes in North America as being.
The next time you walk around, I'm pretty sure you'll check it, right?
That's great origin story as well. Yeah. Just to focus on the actual the sponsorship, the partnership that you have. You've got access to the tournaments and the players when they're going around the world. Those 10 men's tournaments now this year and 7 on the women's, including a couple of combined, like we have coming up this weekend. You've got the branding on the shirts. You've also gone down the path of creating a new podcast as well, Triton Lake Perform, looking at that sort of intersection between sport and business, which is something we're very familiar with here. The first edition of it, an interview with Billy Dardis, very entertaining, very insightful as well. A lot of really good stuff in there about, how he has personally managed himself through sport and through his career in business as well. What else can we look forward to in the series, in the rest of it?
So we will have one with David Nusafora that we'll be dropping, I think the term is, right? That'll be released before Christmas, so hopefully the week after the second Dubai tournament. So that'll be interesting, and that'll give a slightly different perspective. Obviously not looking from inside the players' camp, but looking at it from an IRFU perspective and what the relevance of the Sevens program to them is. And then in particular for the theme of this podcast, it's things about structuring and dealing with transition and all of those kinds of elements, right? Because when we think about it, and the more time you spend on it, the more you realize that there's a huge amount of crossover there, which you're obviously very familiar with. But in our business, we're always thinking about, having a growth mindset, being really open-minded, listening to what people say, letting them challenge. And then it's all about, okay, well, working out what is the most effective way to achieve what you're trying to achieve, planning for that, and practicing it if you need to, and then executing on it with a high degree of accuracy. And they're all of the things that tie this back. And I think beyond it just being a podcast and an interesting subject matter for folks to listen to, I think genuinely that Triton Lake as a business are going to learn things that we'll be able to implement from this partnership as well. And then beyond this year, in terms of the podcasts, we will obviously speak to other relevant, not just people on the sports side, but business folks that have that elite performance mindset, to feed back a little bit the other way. And we're hoping to roll them out pretty much monthly, at least through the season, as the 7 series goes on. So hopefully we'll continue to have some interesting content there for people to listen to.
Well, it is a very smart way to link the business and the sport. Always good to see that in a partnership where you've actually put a fair amount of thought into just how much you're going to get out of it, as well as how much you're going to put into it. Looking forward to following the journey through the Sevens season and through the season of the podcast as well. But for the moment, Conor Smyth, founder and CEO of Triton Lake, thanks very much for sharing all that with us today.
No problem. Thank you very much, Rob. Pleasure to talk.